is we've asked people how much they'd be willing to spend on climate, addressing climate change through your utility bills. And most say they're not even willing to spend $5 a month more. Well, we're talking about not just doubling, but tripling and quadrupling of utility bills.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy and politics in the state of Colorado. I'm co-host Jake Fogleman, joined by my other co-host Amy Cooke. And today, what we want to talk to you guys about is the latest happenings at the Colorado Public Utilities Commission. I know it's everyone's favorite topic, but it is a very important entity in the state because it controls, frankly, what you pay for electricity and gas. And it's that gas point that we want to hit on today because they just approved Xcel Energy's Clean Heat Plan. So just to kick us off, Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the PUC just did?
Yeah, and you know what? I do love that we're talking about the PUC. I used to say this before when I was running energy and environmental policy at the Independence Institute. I used to say, I go to the PUC proceedings, or we would follow them so that the rest of the world doesn't have to. Now you really have to, because these people, to your point, they control how much your utility bill is, right? So the legislature and the governor set the policy agenda, and then the regulated utilities like Xcel appear before the Public Utilities Commission, and they make their case for why they have to charge X amount to ratepayers. The PUC is supposed to be the ratepayers' eyes and ears. They are supposed to be the sort of our watchdog. And let's face it, that has not been the case in a very long time. The Public Utilities Commission, ever since Ron Binns, who was appointed back in after Bill Ritter was elected, so it would have been 2007, has been more concerned with climate change agenda rather than actually what ratepayers pay. So that I just want people to know that for background, and I think that's why we're starting to hear more and more and more and talking more about the Public Utilities Commission. So there was this article over the weekend, and thank you for sharing it, or maybe it was the end of last week, but this is from the Colorado Sun. I'm just going to read it because, sorry, but it gives me a chuckle. Xcel's $440 million plan to cut greenhouse gas emissions gets Colorado's okay, meaning the Public Utilities Commission okay. So $440 million plan. Then here's the rest of the headline. But it could boost utility bills again. Okay. You're giving them $440 million more of our money. Yes, it's going to boost utility bills again. But I like this too. This is the subhead. The Clean Heat Plan seeks to move more Colorado homes and businesses to electricity from natural gas. Some worry the utility could make windfall profits from fighting the climate crisis. Well, welcome to the world of politicized power in Colorado when it comes to climate change. This has been the bargain that the left in Colorado has made with Xcel Energy since really they took over the legislature in the state back in the early 2000s. They started with this climate change agenda, and Excel was willing to go along with it so long as they could make their profit and recoup costs from ratepayers. And the Democrats, Steve Fenberg was one of them, they all went along and said, yeah, this is where we want to go, and of course we're going to let you collect from ratepayers. And that's why Excel has been more than happy to fight the climate crisis, because they could profit off of it. One of the things, Jake, as listeners to this show and viewers to this show will know, we did that 3-part study. We showed how much it's going to cost for cost Coloradans to implement the Polis plan, which is 100% wind, solar, and batteries. Now you add on home electrification, home heating electrification, and the price tag is $620 billion roughly. A good chunk of that is utility profits. That is exactly what it is, because that's how the system works. So the fact that that some are now catching on to this, I'm thinking, where the heck have you been? But here's part of it too, and this is really the important part. This clean heat plan was set forth by the legislature. It was a bill passed in the legislature. So look to your legislature. Don't look, you can blame Excel, but Excel's doing exactly what Excel does. Thinking that Excel is somehow just going to build all this stuff and not try and make a profit off of it is like expecting a rattlesnake not to bite you. Excel is doing what Excel does, which is it has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders. So it invests money based on the climate that the legislature has set, and then it is allowed to make a profit off of those investments. That is exactly what Excel is doing. The legislature is responsible for it. But if you want to know what the legislature is responsible for, household monthly utility bills could go up. We could see them $800, $900, $1,000 electricity bills by 2040. And if you wonder why nobody talks about the price of this stuff, with the exception of us, because we talk about it all the time, it's because the state looks at something when they pass these bills, they look at a fiscal note, but the fiscal note only looks at state expenditures to implement a policy. It doesn't look at what it's going to cost the average customer, the average Coloradan. That's what we do, and that's what we've done, so that everybody knows how much it's going to cost, including legislators now, they do. So everybody knows how much it's going to cost and ultimately who is responsible. We know that the Badger Institute did a study specifically on heat pumps, which I know you know more about. So I'm going to let you talk about what this clean heat plan, what does it mean? Where are the costs going to come from, and what does it mean to get rid of our natural gas furnace?
Yeah, I love just teeing it off with that Colorado Sun headline and subheading, because as you pointed out, longtime listeners of this show probably chuckled along with you when you read that, because this has been a constant ongoing theme of ours, that legislature adopts something, kicks it to Excel to implement it, and then the PUC is happily willing to go along with that, and Excel profits, and we all get higher energy costs. And that's what you have here. So SB 21-264, I believe it was the bill that kicked off what clean heat plans. It basically directed all of the state's gas utilities to find ways to reduce their emissions. I think 22% by 2030 is the current cap, but expect to see that obviously expanded upon in the coming years. And to do that, it set forth a few strategies that they can use to do that. Some of it's just run-of-the-mill energy efficiency, demand side management, they call it. And one of the big ones is so-called beneficial electrification. And that's where the heat pumps you mentioned come in. And that means if you're one of the 70% of Coloradans that uses natural gas to stay warm in the winter, that means switching that to an electric form of heat of some kind, whether it's baseboard heating or heat pumps, which have become sort of all the rage these days. And heat pumps are actually pretty cool. The way they work is they, instead of actually creating heat or cooling, they just move around cold air and hot air. So when it's cold outside, they can somehow, it's actually pretty impressive, can extract heat and push that and basically move that into your home. And vice versa. When it's hot outside, they can find cool air and push that into your home to keep you cool. Now, that sounds great. The only problem is this great technology tends to struggle both at altitude and when temperatures drop below freezing. And Colorado listeners might, raise an eyebrow at that because we're a mile high in the metro area and we get pretty cold winters. They can still work in those, low temperatures, but they drastically lose their efficiency advantages. And you get to a point where it ends up costing way more to heat your home using this heat pump than it would have if you would have just stuck with a good, decent efficiency natural gas furnace. And that's, I did a blog post, I think we'll put it in the show notes, where I sort of crunched the numbers at a point in time where if you convert electricity, Colorado's electricity costs and their natural gas costs, if you convert them to a common unit, electricity in the state is currently about 4 times more expensive than natural gas is. So that tells you a little bit about, this isn't beneficial electrification is a little bit of a misnomer. Who's it benefiting? Because if you're the consumer and you have to pay 4 times more for what, essentially the same service, or perhaps a worse service if it gets cold, you're left far worse off.
Yeah, and you said so Wisconsin did a study on it. The Badger Institute did a study, said the cost would be, and this because that state, Wisconsin, is looking to move to heat pumps as well. They've got a governor who wants to go there. So the Badger Institute, which is a sister think tank in Wisconsin, they did a study in selected areas of Wisconsin. Now, you think it gets cold here or in Colorado? It gets really cold in the northern parts of Wisconsin. They found that the additional cost to a homeowner would be in excess of $20,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. And so one of the things that we've done when we've polled is we've asked people how much they'd be willing to spend on climate, addressing climate change through your utility bills. And most say they're not even willing to spend $5 a month more. Well, we're talking about not just doubling, but tripling and quadrupling of utility bills. And I know you said that there was a poll out of Chicago, the University of Chicago.
Yeah, the National Opinion Research Center based out of Chicago, every year they do this poll. So it's a good metric because you can kind of keep benchmarks year to year. And they just recently had one, I think 2 weeks ago, they just released their latest version. And they asked folks, how many of you say you want to do something to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And it has overwhelming support. And then it goes to, well, how many of you would be willing to pay even $1 a month more to do that? And it polls below 50%. So the vast majority of people are not willing to even spend an additional dollar to do this sort of stuff. And when you're talking about these opaque regulatory proceedings where, $500 million are being passed overnight and it's going to be passed on to a little, surcharge on your utility bill, people, I think if they were aware of that, just based on the polling, I don't think they would stand for that necessarily. And I just want to touch on also the Badger Institute study you pointed, because it's not just the good folks at the Badger Institute that found this, but NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, also did a study comparing the cost of natural gas heating and heat pumps in Colorado. And what they found is for the lowest efficiency heat pumps that are out there, you can come out ahead, like about 22% of Colorado households can maybe make that pencil out. The problem is those are the ones that don't work at cold temperatures. And so if they compare it to cold climate heat pumps, there are 0% of Colorado households that are financially better off using one of those cold climate heat pumps than they are using natural gas. So beneficial electrification, again, I repeat, beneficial for whom? Because it clearly is not the Colorado consumer or the person trying to stay home or heated at home in the winter at an affordable price.
So wrap your mind around that. 0% of the more efficient energy or heat pumps, 0%. The math, and this is according to NREL.
Yep.
0% of the math just doesn't work. on zero.
Yeah. And I think the commissioners are aware the math doesn't work, because I want to touch on something from the actual decision where they approved this clean heat plan, because they did a little funny business, I would say, with the cost allocation. So you would think, if we're going to adopt, a big chunk of this $440 million towards incentivizing folks to electrify, that those costs would be borne by electric customers, because that's generally how it works. If you're making investments in the electric system, electric customers pay for it. If you're making investments in the gas system, gas customers pay for it. Well, in this case, that's what Xcel proposed to do. And the Colorado Energy Office, even, Polis's very own Colorado Energy Office, agreed with that. They said it makes sense. Well, the commissioners instead decided that gas customers will help shoulder the financial burden of subsidizing folks to get off the gas system to adopt these heat pumps and electrify. So if you're a gas customer that doesn't choose to do that, you're still paying for, let's be frank here, higher income folks that can afford to electrify. You're paying for them to do so while also taking on an increased share of maintaining the gas distribution system, because that's another portion of your bill goes to maintaining this extensive gas network. So you basically get double charged for no benefit, and not only no benefit, but you're actually subsidizing someone that probably doesn't need help to do this kind of stuff. So it really is just insane.
You know what? It's just robbery. Like, they're literally using regulatory proceedings to steal from low-income people, low-income Coloradans, to subsidize high-income Coloradans to get their more expensive heat pump, which, because they know the math doesn't work. I mean,
That's right.
If you made that a ballot measure, I guarantee you it would fail.
Right.
I guarantee you it would fail. So one of the things, and I should say for all of this, you're still going to get rolling blackouts. You're still going to have periods of time based on Colorado's trajectory right now, where the state isn't going to be able to, we will not be able to meet demand. So you're going to pay all of that money, and the state's not going to be able to meet the demand. Utilities won't be able to meet the demand, so you'll have rolling blackouts. So even with all of that, so how beneficial is it?
Right.
Really, and you asked the question, you said, so who's it beneficial for? This is what Colorado Public Radio wrote. This is what they say. In a win for environmental groups. So guess who won in this? The Sierra Club, the Western Resource Advocates, NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council. Those are the winners in this. In a win for environmental groups. It doesn't say in a win for ratepayers. Doesn't say in a win for Coloradans. In a win for environmental groups. This is why we brought up those other states a couple of shows ago, what they're doing, where they prioritize the people in their states, the people who live in their states. They're prioritizing the state is taking responsibility for ensuring that there is enough power for residents and that power is affordable and reliable. Colorado puts it puts climate well ahead of people.
Yeah.
And it is an entirely different perspective, and we will pay dearly for it. One of the things that you'll hear too is that Public Utilities Commission will say, well, we did these regional meetings and they do these town halls, and I've gone to some of them. They're just dog and pony shows. It's kabuki theater. The decision's already made. But here's the thing. They did the regional meetings for this at a time when there was no real price on it. Now we know a price. The Independence Institute has modeled the price, and Xcel Energy is saying $440 million, and I'm telling you, that's a down payment. That is, think of this. Think of it being 10% down. Like you do with if you're a first-time homeowner, home buyer, and you're going to do 10% down, or you get a VA loan and it's 10% down as opposed to the normal. Think of that $440 million as being the down payment on this electrification.
Yeah.
Because it is going to exceed $440 million, and it's going to exceed it by a lot. Here's what they have done. If you think that inflation is bad now, when you see it hit your utilities, your utility bills in coming years, it is going to be inflation on steroids. And when you look at on poll after poll, University of Chicago, but at poll after poll, when they look at issues, climate and the environment polls well below inflation, crime, things like that are kitchen table issues. These people are modeling out, 100 years from now, what they think the temperature of the earth will be. Well, here's one of the things we know is that you're going to spend a lot of money. In fact, people aren't going to be able to afford it to pay for something that may happen 100 years from now. It's criminal. It is absolutely criminal. And the buck stops with lawmakers and Jared Polis. But here's the worst part, Jake. When all of these bills come due, none of those lawmakers will be there, and Jared Polis will be long gone. Long gone.
I was going to say, that is always I think that emboldens some lawmakers because Colorado does have term limits, and obviously the governor has term limits. So it's all well and good, 20 years prior to, like you said, the bill coming due, to be very ambitious and at the forefront. This clean heat plan law was the first in the nation, so they get to pat themselves on the back for being so forward thinking. And then the bill comes due and they're nowhere to be found because they're long gone out of politics and we all have to deal with the repercussions. And just one more thing I want to touch on as we're coming up on time here before I kick it over to you for some takeaways. It's worth just remarking on, we're good free marketeers here. We like liberty. Just, of all the things that are wrong with this proceeding, it also violates just individual choice. If you want to put a heat pump in your home, by all means, go ahead, put a heat pump, spend your money, put a heat pump in your home. More power to you. But the minute you start, one, forcing people to do that, and not only forcing people, but intentionally raising the cost of gas because it is cheaper currently, intentionally raising those costs to make it look better by comparison to sort of, engineer people in the direction you want. I have to remark on that because I cannot stand that kind of policy making, whether it's an energy policy or any other policy field. I hate that. I hate that. I cannot state enough how much I hate that. Let consumers choose, let them vote, whatever makes economic sense for themselves. And I tend to think that produces the best outcomes, but who am I? But we'll kick it over to you, Amy, for your takeaways.
Can I add one more thing too?
Sure.
We actually do know that if you want to reduce emissions in Colorado and you want to do it in a more affordable and reliable way, there is a way. And that is, if they actually cared about the climate and they actually cared about doing it in a way that is reliable and the most affordable, it still isn't going to be cheap, but you could do it for less if they would just use nuclear. But the state of Colorado is hostile to nuclear. They won't use it. So color me skeptical on their grandstanding on climate. It is really just a front for wind, solar, and batteries, because if they cared about climate, nuclear would be in the mix, and it's nowhere to be found. They're still openly hostile to it.
We'll see if they change their tune a little bit, as, like you said, when the bill starts coming due and the reliability issues start to appear. But what takeaways would you have for our listeners from this? We've covered a lot of ground here on this. It's sort of a complicated topic, PUC law. It is. But it makes a big difference in people's lives. 70% of the state uses natural gas.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a couple of things. Obviously, I've got three. One is that I am still surprised, and I will continue to be surprised about the fact that nobody is talking a lot about the impact on consumers and ratepayers other than PowerGab. There is no one else is doing it or getting down to numbers, looking at the impact over the long term, the impact to ratepayers, and asking, is this the best idea? Is this the best that we can do for Coloradans. No one is doing that other than our show. And it surprises me. If inflation is a huge number, and I would think there is a huge issue this election year, I would think that there would be more people talking about the impact that this is going to have on Coloradans, but they're not. But we'll keep doing it and making sure that the narrative, we'll keep pushing it out there. So no one else except for us here on PowerGab, unless I've missed it somewhere, but PowerGab is talking about it. No one else really is. And then the other thing is when the costs start rolling in, the people responsible aren't going to be there. So the people that put us in this position are going to be long gone. And I think we need this reckoning sooner rather than later. And then, of course, we know that we're not going to be able to power the state. So get yourself a generator. And in this case, you may need two.
Sage advice as always, get a generator, folks. But that does it for us for another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw here, you can go ahead and check out our entire back catalog at powergab.org on YouTube, or you can check us out wherever you get your audio podcasts, whether that's Spotify or iTunes. And if you want to suggest a guest or a show topic for future episodes, send those our way at info@powergab.org. We love to hear from our listeners. You're a great group of informed folks. But until next time, we'll see you.